One of the biggest problems with modern Mortal Kombat and its story isn't the gameplay, it isn't the graphics, it's probably not even the main characters, it's the villains. Because if you go back and look at the older Mortal Kombat games, especially the arcade era and the 3D era, the villains actually felt dangerous. Not because they were stronger on paper, not because somebody told you they were powerful, but because they actually did things, They won, they manipulated people, they changed the world around them. They felt like genuine threats, but nowadays, half the villains feel like they're waiting in line to lose a fight. Like Chronica barely won anything, I remember, in MK11. And that's one of the biggest issues with Mortal Kombat storytelling, especially in Mortal Kombat 11 and in Mortal Kombat 1. The franchise used to create villains that felt larger than life. They were iconic, but now they're like, who? Chronica? Who the hell is that? It feels like they're created to lose. So today I just wanted to talk about how Mortal Kombat forgot to make villains and why some of the greatest villains in the franchise history came from the arcade era, the 3D era, and even the MKX comics. But before we get into that, if you guys don't know me by now, I'm Mr. Frosty Flames, but you can call me Mike. We do anything gaming news, reviews, playthroughs, analysis, and we do it in a chill way with no over editing BS. So if you enjoy that style of content, be sure to hit that sub button and join the Mr. Frosty Flames Legion. Anyways, let's get back to the video. So I want to start with the king himself, probably the most iconic character in this video, Shao Kahn. Because if you grew up with the arcade games, Shao Kahn just wasn't another boss, he was the boss, man. This guy was at the top, this guy was intimidating, this guy conquered realms, he destroyed worlds, he ruled Outworld for centuries, and most importantly, he actually won. He took over Edenia, he took over basically Earthrealm at some point. That's something modern villains rarely get to do. Old Shao Kahn felt unstoppable. The games built him up for years, characters feared him, the lore feared him. Even in Armageddon, he won the whole thing, even fighting him felt unfair, and he would just laugh in your face with his taunts. And honestly, that's what made him memorable. Then we get to modern Shao Kahn, especially in Mortal Kombat 11. And somehow, one of the most intimidating villains in gaming became a professional jobber. This man loses constantly. Katana beats him up, other characters beat him up, heroes beat him up, villains beat him up. At one point, it feels like everybody gets a turn, and that's the problem. The old games treated Shao Kahn like a final boss. He was the guy. Modern Mortal Kombat treats him like another roster slot. I loved it when basically the only guy that was able to beat Shao Kahn was the chosen one, Liu Kang, but now it's like every main character and their brother gets a turn at beating this guy up, and it just sucks, man. I want intimidating Shao Kahn back. Even in Mortal Kombat 1, General Shao does not feel intimidating at all. I don't remember him winning a single fight, and it just sucked, because he's such an iconic character. And aside from Shang Tsung, he's probably the second most iconic villain in Mortal Kombat history, so I just want him to be given some respect. And one thing I miss about the 3D era is that villains were allowed to succeed. The best example I could think of is the Deadly Alliance from Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance, Quan Chi and Shang Tsung. These guys immediately established themselves as threats. How? By killing Liu Kang. In the story, they killed Liu Kang, the chosen one, Liu Kang. Think about how crazy that was. The franchise hero gets killed before the game even starts. It's not even like, halfway through the story or at the end of the story he dies. No, at the beginning of the game, he's killed off in the opening cutscene. That's a statement. It's basically the writers telling players, okay, this isn't the same Mortal Kombat anymore. It's gonna be darker, it's gonna be grittier. The Deadly Alliance wasn't scary because they had magic. They were scary because they got results, they got stuff done. They manipulated everyone, they executed their plans, and actually changed the status quo. And I want you guys to compare that to Mortal Kombat 1's version of the Deadly Alliance, because they were essentially the main villains, right, for a majority of the story. The characters are cool, their designs are cool, but they never nearly feel as threatening as the original Deadly Alliance. The original Deadly Alliance felt like they were controlling the board. The Mortal Kombat 1 version feels like they're pieces on somebody else's board, and that's a huge difference. In essence, they were, because they had the Titan Shang Tsung from the other timeline come in and move them like pawns and put them together. So I guess I'm not wrong when I say they are pieces on somebody else's board. However, come on, they're the Deadly Alliance. You gotta have some respect for them. They have to be intimidating. At least let them get stuff done. They just get beat up at every time you see them. Like, what do they really even do? They beat up Johnny Cage and Kung Lao and and Kenshi, I guess, but is that basically it? You know, they don't really do much. And I also want to talk about Onaga from Mortal Kombat Deception. You know, if Shao Kahn represented power, Onaga represented presence. The Dragon King didn't need constant screen time. He didn't need endless dialogue. The moment he appeared, you knew things have changed. Everything about him felt important. You know, his design, the lore, the build-up, the mystery. Even before you fought him, he felt larger than everyone else. And that intro in Mortal Kombat Deception was so badass, where even Quan Chi, Shang Tsung, and Raiden couldn't defeat him. And you know, seeing that's something Mortal Kombat struggles with, especially in the modern era. Villains are introduced so quickly that they barely have time to establish themselves. Onaga was like an event. The moment he arrived, the entire story shifted, and that's what great villains do. They change the atmosphere. Nothing in modern Mortal Kombat was able to capture that same energy, in my opinion. And now let's talk about Blaze from Mortal Kombat Armageddon, because he was built for years. Because people sometimes forget how long Mortal Kombat spent building him up. This wasn't just a villain that appeared out of nowhere. Players saw Blaze years before Armageddon. The franchise spent multiple games teasing him, building mystery around him, making fans wonder what his purpose really was. Whether you love Armageddon or not, that's good villain construction. The payoff might not have been perfect, but the buildup was there. And that's something modern Mortal Kombat often lacks. You know, things happen immediately, things are rushed, villains appear, villains explain themselves, and then they lose. The end. Blaze felt important because the games gave him time to actually matter. And now let's compare that to Chronica from Mortal Kombat 11, because Chronica should have worked. You know, she's the keeper of time, the creator of timelines, a being beyond gods, beyond the elder gods. On paper, okay, I'll say maybe a fantastic concept, but the execution never landed. And let me tell you why. Because she never felt believable. The game kept telling us she was powerful, but it never really truly made us feel it. Compare that to Shao Kahn, compare that to Onaga, even the Deadly Alliance. Those villains earned their reputation. Chronica felt like she was just handed hers, and that's a huge difference. You know, in Mortal Kombat 11, she just sort of appeared out of nowhere. People thought she was cool, but then like in the story, she appeared during some key moments, froze time, rewinded stuff, and it was just goofy, especially her and Garrus. For a man that was able to rewind time and basically not die, he did absolutely nothing. And the same said for Chronica. She did absolutely nothing. I don't remember her really doing much. You know, comment down below if you remember her doing something important. Nothing off the top of my memory comes up, and that's a problem, especially with the main big bad person, you know, Chronica. And even the MKX comics understood villains, because this is where I give credit to the comics, because they're often forgotten. Because for real, the comics did a better job with villains than some of the games. Blood God Havoc was terrifying. Remember him? Look him up if you don't know him. He was unpredictable. He wasn't the strongest character. He was just very unpredictable, and every page with him felt dangerous. And then surprisingly, there's also Raiko, a character that suddenly felt important. For years, Raiko existed as, you know, that guy who just kind of looked cool. He was, you know, Shao Kahn Jr. The comics finally gave him some purpose. He had ambition, direction. That's all some characters need. The comics understood something modern Mortal Kombat often forgets, and that's a villain doesn't have to just be strong. They have to be interesting, because this is the biggest issue. Modern Mortal Kombat creates jobbers, not villains, jobbers, like in WWE, people whose primary purpose is losing fights. And once that starts happening, the audience stops taking them seriously, because if everybody beats up the villain, why should we fear them? Old Mortal Kombat understood this. You know, villains needed victories, villains needed accomplishments, villains needed moments where they felt unstoppable. Without that, they're just obstacles, and obstacles aren't memorable. And not just the main villain, even like side villains, say like Ferrator, Aaron Black, Reptile, people like that. They're sort of villains in the way where they're like henchmen for the bad guys. However, I feel like they need to be given some victories too, because they're supposed to be all intimidating. You know, the big bad guy chose them to be their henchmen for a reason, because they could win fights, they get things done, but the story just doesn't show that, and it's very, very disappointing to see that. You know, they should treat their villains like how the comics in DC or Marvel do, you know, where the villains basically do some messed up things. They win a lot. Sometimes they defeat the heroes, and it's just like they're unstoppable until they finally lose. And I'm not saying they need to win every fight, but at least give them some credibility before you kill them off or have them get defeated. So when I think about the best villains in Mortal Kombat history, I don't think about power levels, I think about their impact. You know, Shao Kahn had impact, Onaga, Blaze, the Deadly Alliance, even Blood God Havoc had impact. These characters changed the world around them because they felt dangerous, they were important, and most importantly, they felt like real villains. They were credible. Modern Mortal Kombat still has great character designs, they have great concepts, they have very good lore, but somewhere along the way, NRS forgot the most important part, is that a villain has to feel powerful and like they could win. Because the moment players stop believing that, that villain stops becoming a villain and it just becomes a predictable mess of a story and starts becoming another fight on the roster screen. But that's just my take on it. I was inspired to make this video because I made some 3D era videos before in my channel, and a lot of comments were talking about how Onaga was the best, the Deadly Alliance were the best, and you know, Chronica and the modern Deadly Alliance just kind of sucked. And I was like, yeah, you know, I agree with that. Let me make a video on it. So that's just my take on it. Let me know what you guys think down below. What is your favorite Mortal Kombat villain, and what villain do you think is underutilized the most? And I know a lot of you are gonna say Onaga, but what modern Mortal Kombat villain or just jobber would you want to see given light to? And when I mean jobber, I mean people like maybe Reptile, Aaron Black, Ferrator, Devora, blah 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 blah. Maybe not Devora because she was given light when she killed Scorpion in MK11, which kind of sucked, because if you're gonna make a jobber get some shine, why make Devora do it? That's just bruh. But anyways, if you enjoyed this video, make sure you like, share, comment, and subscribe to join the Mr. Frosty Flames Legion. Mr. Frosty Flames out. Thank you all for watching. Yeah!